All right, this is citizenship and immigration attorney Parviz Malakouti. Today is August 28th. This is our 30th mobility space. Today we're talking about whether getting second citizenship necessarily means you're moving. Does that mean you're packing up and going, or are these two totally different concepts? The idea of getting the second citizenship and residing there. This is our 30th space in a series of 50 mobility spaces that we're doing this year on the hottest topics in dual citizenship, freedom of movement, sovereignty, and of course, passports. As a reminder, everybody's welcome. Anybody can speak. If you want to say something, just send me a request and I will approve it right away. I'm going to start off the discussion as I normally do with just a few minutes of talking, just to throw some ideas out there. And then, of course, we'll open it up for discussion. And I do want to just announce a small little shift in format for these spaces. We'll still have topics moving forward, so themes for spaces, but I want to open up the spaces to just general discussion related to mobility moving forward. So when we're starting with today and in future spaces going forward, if we have other topics that are not announced in the space that we want to talk about, that's all fair games. I want this to be kind of a forum for people to talk about citizenship and mobility issues. So with that said, the reason that I made this the topic of today's space is because I find with people that are not kind of in this world of second citizenship, sovereignty, mobility, when you say or mention the idea of getting a second citizenship, almost like a knee jerk reaction, you hear back, I would say a majority of the time from Americans, well, why do you want to move to? Okay, I want to get citizenship in Italy. I want to get citizenship in Grenada. I'm thinking about getting citizenship, applying for citizenship in Vanuatu. Then the response comes, well, why do you want to move to Vanuatu? Why do you want to move to Italy? Don't you know that Spain has problems, etc., etc.? And it seems like there's this really inextricably intertwining of the concept of citizenship and residency in the minds of a lot of people out there, especially Americans. So I just want to open up the discussion, throw a few points out there basically about why people would get citizenship without plans to imminently move, and then just open up for discussion. So a few things I'll just throw out there. First of all, I published an article in the Las Vegas Sun almost 3 years ago. I think it was September of 2022. It was entitled Why Americans Pursue Second Citizenship. And it was kind of my base attempt to just give an answer out there of what I see from my clients and people that consult with me that are Americans that are considering picking up a second citizenship, especially from a so-called poor country, a country that's viewed to be inferior by a lot of Americans. And in that article, really, I outlined the fact that for the majority of Americans, at least the ones that I come across in my practice, for the majority of them, it comes down to having a plan B, okay, to having a second country that they have the immediate highest right of entry and residency in. That's what we see there, okay? And a lot of Americans were woken up during the pandemic because of constriction of their visa-free access, right? During the pandemic, a lot of Americans kind of got a taste of what it's like to be a citizen of a country that does not have robust visa-free access, and so I think that kickstarted a lot of the interest basically in second citizenship for Americans. But here are a few of the reasons. I'll just list a few, and then we'll take it from there. First of all, when you get citizenship in a second country, even if you don't move there, you can enjoy the potential springboard benefits of that citizenship. Springboard benefits are benefits that you get by virtue of being a citizen in one country in third party countries. Most well-known springboard benefit is visa-free access, right? You get a citizenship in one country, typically you're now entitled to the visa-free access that those citizens get, right? So visa-free access, satellite residency rights. Another reason that people enjoy second citizenship without moving there is the second passport, a second entity that can issue you a widely recognized travel document to travel on, right? Next reason, have a latent plan B if you need to live somewhere long term in the future, or as what I call a bridging residency. Bridging residency is when you need to get out of Dodge immediately. You just need a safe place to go for a month, 2 months, 6 months while you figure out the next space. Second citizenship is also a bridging residency. It has a bridging residency nestled within it because you can go there typically right away. Okay, couple newer reasons that I've been exploring, thinking about. people have not come to me citing these reasons yet, but just in my own study and research of what I think is coming down the pike in the next few years, I've also thought about second citizenship as future-proofing against future ETAs, electronic travel authorizations. I've written recently, and I just had a post this morning on X about how visa-free access is actually morphing worldwide into what I call visa light. Anyway, visa-free is becoming visa light. I've written about this. Others are kind of writing about this as well. ETAs from the UK, ETA from Australia, JASTA, Japanese Electronic Travel Authorization, and then of course ETAs, the big one coming down the pike for visa-free access of Americans to the European Union. When you request an electronic travel authorization, you risk being denied. Okay, and some people are going to be denied. Okay, the very purpose of the electronic travel authorization is to be able to deny people before they board the plane. Okay, to avoid the hassle and the cost. So it is inevitable that Americans that are trying to travel visa-free, okay, who have to request electronic travel authorizations, are eventually going to start being denied down the line. Now, what does this have to do with second citizenship? Well, citizens of those countries are typically not subject to electronic travel authorization. ETAs are typically imposed as kind of a substitute for tourist access on foreign citizens of other countries, right? So obviously, just as an example, if you're an American and if you have a profile that makes you possibly vulnerable for denial of an ETA in the future, okay, denial ETIAS, let's say you have a criminal conviction, travel to Iran or South Sudan or North Korea, you might be at risk of being denied an ETA to travel to the European Union in a few years. Well, if you pick up citizenship, and I don't want to say it blithely because it's not that easy necessarily to pick up citizenship, but if you have a certain lineage and you qualify potentially for Italian citizenship by descent, Hungarian citizenship by descent, and you become a citizen of one of those EU countries, you're no longer subject to the ETA requirements. Okay, so that vulnerability is no longer there for you. Okay, so these are just some of the reasons that a person might want to pick up a second citizenship even without imminent plans to travel there. We got John Richardson here as well. We got Patience as Alpha. We got Patrick. We got Scott. Here's another reason. What if you're a U.S. citizen and you're U.S. citizen renunciation curious? What if you're considering, or you think down the line it might be for you to want to renounce or otherwise relinquish U.S. citizenship? Are you going to try to do that like Glenn down in Paraguay and renounce into statelessness and be subject, to the whims of countries that you're not citizen of to issue a travel document in order to go other places? Or are you going to want to have at least one other citizenship that you can fall back on? Well, I suspect that most people that are either have plans to renounce or renunciation curious don't want to renounce or try to renounce into statelessness. They want to have at least one other citizenship, at least one place that they have the highest right of access and residency in. So that could be something down the line, right? A lot of people that listen to these spaces that are kind of into these discussions that we have, they're not thinking about just, oh, hey, I'm doing research because I want to move to one place and then I'm done thinking about this stuff. A lot of people are thinking on, long term, okay, trying to pursue sovereignty, self-sovereignty, freedom. It's a long-term project for them, thinking about 30, 40, 50 years down the future for themselves and their children, right? And therefore, a lot of people, want to put themselves in a position to be able to exit, to do what I call the deep exit from a country, okay? Shallow exit is leaving the country. What I call deep exit is leaving the country and also severing ties by way of renouncing or relinquishing citizenship. So these are some of the reasons, the big reasons that are out there for why people may want to get second citizenship and not move there. But the point cannot be hammered enough that you don't have to move to another country when you become citizen there, right? Assuming, of course, that your path to citizenship is not based off of a period of residency and physical presence in that country. So the categories that I'm talking about primarily are citizenship by descent, citizenship by investment, citizenship by exception, and then the few countries that are out there that have true citizenship by marriage. I mean, straight citizenship, not residency by marriage. that then leads to naturalization eligibility. That latter category, that is not citizenship by marriage in my book. That's residency by marriage. Many, many countries have that. Way fewer countries have just straight citizenship through marriage. So anyway, that's kind of my preface there. Thanks. Shout out to Patrick for letting me know that I was speaking into the wind there to nobody. But I think I rehashed over what I was wanting to go over to begin with. Let me start off with a question to Patrick, because I know Patrick McFawn deals with a lot of citizenship by descent. He's a consultant for citizenship by descent, and this is a category. This is one of those categories where people can get a second citizenship and not have to have a period necessarily of continuous residency there. Therefore, this is a category of people that might be pursuing citizenship without plans of imminently moving there. So let me kick out this first question to you, Patrick. Among your base of clients and people that consult with you, what are the top reasons that they cite for wanting to pursue a citizenship by descent that you help them with?
Yeah, great question. I basically see three buckets of people when it comes to citizenship without like moving to a specific country. And I will start off by echoing, I wish I did not have the conversation so many times about, oh, I think I'm eligible for this citizenship, but I don't need it. I've heard that conversation more than 10 times. It's very frustrating to me because it shows you how sometimes people who are eligible for what is arguably a very valuable blessing uh, or opportunity just completely discounted because they don't really understand it. But I would say I generally see three buckets of people who pursue citizenship by descent, which for many cases you never even have to visit the country, uh, which is mind-boggling in some cases, but very beneficial in others. The three categories are people who are on the younger side. They haven't started a family. They're a young professional and they want the option. They say I should get it now because I don't know what it's going to be like in 10 years, and that for them is just life options. That's particularly true with EU citizenship for a country that's a member of the EU. The second bucket I see oftentimes is I don't see it as much because I tend to be more of a genealogist and speak to citizenship and mobility. Um, but it is a very large market segment of people who are eligible, and that is an older generation. Think later Gen Xers and Boomers, and they're getting the citizenship not because they're doing it for themselves, unless they're using it as a retirement vehicle, an option for a retirement vehicle. Um, but they're seeing it as a way to pass a legacy on to their, already adult children. That I do see. Um, and the last category, which is I think will get bigger over time, but isn't as much today. But that is um, cultural or for lack of a better word, like ethnic identity. So there's certain neighborhoods in certain cities in the United States that are proudly, Italian or proudly Irish or proudly Ukrainian. And so having the option to say, I don't just talk the talk, I walk the walk because I'm also a citizen of this country. It's a way to uh, foster identity. That also kind of goes towards that legacy piece I just spoke about. So there's some overlap there, but I think those are like the three big buckets generally. And outside of that last one, both of them essentially boil down to a different chapter of a plan B. Um, and so I think that kind of speaking to that flavor of plan B, depending on who you're speaking to, is the real way to kind of discuss the benefits of a citizenship without moving.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't even touch on that identity piece, which is central, especially in citizenship by descent cases. That's a great point. A lot of people start thinking about a particular citizenship because of nostalgia, thinking about a past mother or grandmother or grandfather, and that kind of sets them down. That kind of sends them down a rabbit hole, right? Of learning more about the country, the culture, and then getting interested in researching the citizenship laws, and then sometimes coming across potential eligibility for themselves. So those are great points. Um, Patience as alpha. Why would you need three citizenships? You can't live in you can't live in three countries at once. You can't have your butt on three horses at the same time. Patience. Why would you have three citizenships at once? If you can speak, if you're able to answer.
Hey, well, that's a bloated question. Um, I can only speak for myself, but I think I've already made that metaphor that I see periods of life as like different essentially different chapters where you out to be probably in a different jurisdiction. I think at least for myself, I don't see myself retiring in the place where I work, which is also not the place where I grew up, and so on and so on. So having these options, having this highest right of entry into a different places guarantees me some optionality there, some safety. But that's for me. For my kids, I don't really know what they will be up to. What I know is that they, they've been granted a curse upon birth. I think John knows what I'm referring to. So that that means that I need it for them. I think you alluded to that early on, that dual citizenship for Americans is something they seek if they're like renunciation curious. For Americans, I believe, but I'm not the best suited to uh, to talk about this. But I believe it's even further than that. Dual citizenship at birth actually grants you an exclusion to the covert expatriate status. So that's one of the reasons why I ended up making sure pursuing this citizenship at birth, not just simply, additional citizenships for the family. And lastly, what Patrick mentioned as well, like, there's this need for 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 me, at least as a family, you need to make sure that everyone knows where they're from, knows why they ended up with such citizenships, and so on. So the reason why I'm making sure that I'm pursuing those is mostly family oriented, education opportunities. That's the reason why I'm pursuing some residencies, right? And retirement, thinking about retirement as well, and obviously citizenship in the United States with regard to retirement is something really complicated, healthcare costs and things like that. So I think if you don't want to be left hanging for different periods of your life, you might as well just try to think about that citizenship portfolio in that context.
Patience, you've made a lot of posts. You've made kind of a lot of content around this concept of the way I see it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but citizenships kind of for different seasons in your life, right? And the way I understand the concept, which is very interesting concept, and I think it's largely accurate. The way I see it is the idea is based on the fact that certain drawbacks of citizenships, so extraterritorially imposed obligations, have more of an outsized negative effect on you based off of where you're at in your life, where you're at in the timeline, right? So I think one example, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one example you brought up is American citizenship, right? America is a high earning society. Okay, right? Like you can earn a lot of money, right? Working in the U.S. economy, being connected to the U.S. economy, right? So that might be the season of a person's life in which they're, at their peak earning years might be when American citizenship is worth the most, and American citizenship might be worth less to them when they're later on at retirement age in their life, okay? Because they're not taking advantage of access to that supercharged economy, but at the same time, if they've retired abroad, they're still observing many of the downside aspects of that citizenship. Is that more or less kind of the concept that you tweet about? And in any case, can you speak a little bit more about that concept, citizenships for different seasons?
Sure. Well, that's exactly it. I I'm reflecting upon my specific circumstances, which means that the citizenship that got me my education and higher education is not the same citizenship that got me my career and my financial opportunities. And I'm pretty sure it's not going to be the same citizenship where I'm going to be drawing on those financial opportunities, if that makes sense. The reason why I think people should be big is because I mean, at least on that, is because there are certain spots, certain time, places in your life where it makes the most sense for you to chase citizenship. The one where I'm the biggest on is after, and at least higher education. Many countries have a paved path for higher education youngsters to go and graduate and potentially start working and get a second citizenship. I'm thinking Canada mainly is big on that. There are other options, but Canada is a big one. Uh, and I think that people have to think about the way they map their life in and what mobility option makes sense in that stage of life. I one of the last really big thing I think that is happening with that context is the problem that accidental Americans have been facing these past few decades. I think this problem, and I've been tweeting about that, but I think this problem has been um, has morphed into, for some profiles, a more of a benediction than a curse, because youngsters nowadays, they tend to be higher educated, or at least they tend to be bilingual a lot. They can navigate um, two systems, and I think for some profiles, I'm not saying everyone, but I think some profiles might benefit from having this dual citizenship at birth. I mean, this dual citizenship onto them. Um, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, just to piggyback on what you said about pursuing second citizenship when you're kind of younger, university, right? Um, Presumably, that's the time in life that people are poor, right? They have less money, maybe less to lose by being tax resident in a high tax jurisdiction, in order to pick up the sufficient physical presence in order to naturalize there. And so that could be, that could be one aspect. And then the other thing is, some countries, the United States unfortunately is not like this, but in some countries, the kind of daisy chain of visas and residency permits that can lead to naturalization eligibility is fairly easy coming from a student visa, right? So especially in some European countries, you can kind of come there as a student, get a student visa. Sometimes you can even accrue time to naturalization eligibility on the student visa. Sometimes you have to move from the student visa to another residency permit, and then to naturalize. And I think, it's been a while since I took a look at the code, but I think in France, right, if you have a master's degree, if I'm not mistaken, you're naturalization eligible, not naturalized, but naturalization eligible after 2 years of residency. Is that right, Patience? If you know.
That's correct. 2 years, but also tax returns. So 2 years in a job. That's correct.
2 years in a job. 2 years in a job. Okay, right. So fly over to Paris, do a master's program, make sure you know French, right? And then be resident for 2 years with a job, tax return, and then apply for French citizenship. So that's just one example, right? And yeah, I think your point is well taken, right? You have different vulnerabilities and different kind of aspects of your life that are different levels of unwieldiness in your life. Let's put it that way, right? When you're younger, right, in your late teens and 20s, right, poor, okay, less to lose by presumably, right, possibly less to lose by being resident in a high tax jurisdiction, and also possibly the most location freedom, right, before you have potentially a family and people that depend on you that you have to move around with. I think that strategy that you're talking about, Patience, is I think we're going to be seeing that kind of grow in the coming years, especially as more and more countries are being hammered by providing a residency path to naturalization eligibility that does not require significant physical presence. To me, physical presence on the ground, okay, so literally on a day by day basis, okay, the number of days in a year that your feet are on that ground in that country, that's kind of the most difficult to substitute element for applying for another citizenship. It's the hardest to substitute. It's the hardest to fake or to game. It can also be the highest stakes, right? Because if you're physically present in a country, in certain countries for over a period of time, you start incurring additional, potentially significant obligations. So, therefore, given that that's kind of the most difficult to game element, I do think, I don't know, maybe the kids that are 12 or 13 right now that are learning about this stuff, especially as there's more practitioners and creators writing about this, I do think we're going to be seeing more and more of them, execute a plan to try to go learn a language, or not learn a language, but go to a foreign country that has a relatively uh, delineated path to naturalization eligibility, get a degree there, stay for a few years, and then get on that path to that citizenship. Okay, so we got boat, we got bad boat here, bad boat club. We got a few new listeners here. Reminder to everybody who's listening: if anybody wants to speak, you're welcome to. Just send me a request, and I will approve that right away. Everybody is welcome to speak. We got Scott here. Welcome, Scott. What do you think, Scott, about second citizenship? Do you have well? Let me ask you a question. Do you think a person should be obligated to have some period of residency in a country in order to qualify for citizenship?
Hi there. Hi, Parviz, everyone. Well, if I was the dictator, yes. But every country's up to its own. Can do what can do what it wants for itself. Yes. I mean that. Yeah. So that's my short answer. And just another reason for second citizenship, which I don't think I've heard mentioned yet, which but I think is I think I see some seeds or green shoots as it's becoming a more important one. Is that business opportunities around the world? I'm thinking of two of the ones which are probably least exciting for most people at the moment, which are Egypt and Sierra Leone. Now, both of these give access to very large and growing populations, growing markets. I don't know enough to say that being a citizen of Egypt will give you some advantage in terms of doing business there. I mean, I know Sierra Leone is a member of ECOWAS. That gives you access to Nigeria. I mean, again, that's another huge and growing market. These are markets of the future. So I would say that if you view citizenship purely as a commodity and you're from a Western country and of an entrepreneurial bent, then I would say these are quite good passports to perhaps look at, just purely from the purpose of gaining access to business opportunities.
Yeah, that's a great point, Scott. So that falls under the category of what I would call springboard benefits, right? Getting citizenship in Sierra Leone in order to have preferred access to another country in ECOWAS, especially if they waive some visa requirements, or as for example, as Patience as Alpha was tweeting this morning, if citizenship in one country allows you to be exempt from having to file for or having to request an electronic travel authorization. Absolutely. Super important benefit. Um, One piece of news that's a little bit timely that I bring right now is I've spoken before about one, what I call underrated springboard benefit, which is friendlier consulate springboarding, aka consular shopping. Okay. And what that means basically is by virtue of citizenship in a second country, having access to a whole new set of consulates of a third country in order to be able to apply for a benefit in that third country. So what I'm talking about is this. Okay, you know, most countries, when you're applying for a visa or a residence or a citizenship, they don't want you to just apply any consulate that they have anywhere in the world. They typically want to limit you to one or a few consulates that you apply at. Okay, so consular jurisdiction. And every country has their own laws, of course. There's some variety, but generally, the criteria for where they want you to apply tends to be based off of where you're resident or citizen. Okay, countries typically want you to apply for a benefit. Okay, at their consulates in countries in which you're either citizen or resident. Okay, that's kind of the preference. And so I've spoken about this dynamic before, about, you know, the idea that the more residencies and citizenships you pick up, necessarily generally the more consulates you're able to access reliably in order to apply for even more mobility benefits. So mobility benefits, mobility freedom in this instance begets more mobility freedom, right? Now, what's the part that's timely? Okay, so I've spoken about and I've written and tweeted about the United States applying for US visas. Okay, so there's guidance in the FAM, Foreign Affairs Manual, okay, about where US visa applicants can apply. Okay, and typically the general rule was residents, so they want you to apply in consulates in which you're resident, okay, and the consular official had discretion, okay, to allow, basically, to take an interview, okay, at a consulate in a jurisdiction in which the applicant was not resident, but they were present, just physically present. Okay, so they just showed up there. Okay, well, lo and behold, and I haven't had a chance to totally unpack this yet, but I saw in the email this morning, consular update, an email put out by immigration practitioner James Hollis. Highly recommend the consular update newsletter. It's about basically consular processing. I saw just in this morning's consular update newsletter that there's new guidance from the State Department to consulates, okay, to only process visa applications at consulates in which the applicant is either resident or national. Okay, meaning basically that they want to kind of cut out even that discretionary ability of the consular officials to receive an application where the applicant is present, even if they don't have residency or citizenship. Okay, so that makes friendlier consular springboarding more difficult, okay, for you in places in which you don't have residency or citizenship, which of course, by extension, right, by negative implication, means that your ability, okay, the value of the citizenship and the residency goes up a little bit, okay, because that's you know, one way that you can consular springboard, right? So in this instance, right, you could be citizen of a second country. Let's call it Italy. I guess I'm picking on Italy for some reason today. You don't live in Italy, okay, but you want to have you want to apply for a visa in a third country, okay. Well, typically, and I'm you know, speaking broadly here, okay, now you have access to that third country's consulates in Italy, okay, to lodge an application, because most countries are going to not give you too much trouble if you're applying in a consulate in a country in which you're citizen or resident. So that was just one kind of timely thing that came up here. We can talk about, so actually let me throw it out here for John. Can you speak, John Richardson, or are you just in listen mode right now?
Yes, we're able.
Yes, we're able, and we have another speaker here. Is this what's your name, ma'am?
It's Arga.
Hi, Arga. Welcome. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I was just wondering if you see my hands up. I don't see that. But John, go ahead and I go after. Don't worry.
Sorry, can you specify exactly what it is? Do I hear what exactly?
Do you hear people that are talking to you, okay, mention or reference picking up another citizenship to kind of prepare to put themselves in a position to be able to relinquish in the future, even if they don't want to do it right now, but if they're renunciation curious, as we call it?
Sometimes, but that group of people, interestingly, would as I think about this, are probably only American citizens. Well, obviously, right? How can I put this? They talk about this when they feel extreme urgency to get out. Okay, you get people coming in occasionally who, I want to be out of U.S. citizenship, within 12 or 18 months or something, and how do I pick up a citizenship quickly? And it's not intended to be their sort of permanent main citizenship. It's intended to be just something to leverage to get out of U.S. citizenship, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, a bridge, right?
Yeah.
They don't fancy the idea of being stateless or trying to be stateless.
Well, I think that's just borderline insanity. I mean, I know that there are people, with respect, I know that there are people who don't see that as a problem, and there's at least one or two people who've, written rather publicly and extensively about this over the years. But I think that that's a very bad idea, and I think that American citizenship, even for the ones who are desperate to get out, is far better than no citizenship.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Glenn Lee Roberts is a person, I don't think I'm outing anybody here.
Yeah.
He writes about it extensively. He's a former US citizen. He lives in Paraguay now. And he's been very public about his experiences, why he wanted to relinquish. In fact, I got to get this finished. I have pending a written interview with him that we started months ago. I got to actually put in final form and get his review and approval. But he's a guy who renounced into zero citizenships, into statelessness, right? I think, I agree with John. I think his situation is kind of the exception. He claims that he's happy and feels good about it. I've not dealt with somebody that's renounced U.S. citizenship into statelessness, but I have had immigration clients that are stateless. I've had a few over the years. One of which we did an anonymous interview on my website. It's called "What's It Like to Actually Be Stateless," and the upshot is these people go through all kinds of friction and difficulty throughout their life. So, obviously, can't paint with too broad of a brush. Maybe there's some profile out there for whom statelessness serves, but I can say from my experience, in the vast majority of instances, the people are miserable and not free at all.
You know what?
What's the main point for them not to have a state?
Um, it's not. I don't want to speak too much on Glenn Lee Roberts's behalf, but I don't think his goal was to become stateless. I think it was just to get out of U.S. citizenship, and he valued that deep exit so much that he decided it was worth becoming stateless.
But wouldn't you agree that before doing that, you need to kind of get informed what you're heading to?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think that this is an area where people really can get informed. There's such a disconnect between thinking about this in the abstract and actually living it. I remember, when I was maybe 15 or something, I remember talking to my father, and, I was feeling very anti-police that day for some reason. And my father was, just sort of looked up at me and said, "Well, John, you've never really lived without having the police around, have you? Right?" And I think that that's how people sort of see citizenship as well. Until you've had the experience of living without it, which obviously I haven't, but I mean, I have talked to some people who have. I think it's very difficult to imagine what it would be. I mean, it's like you have no recognition as a human being anywhere, right?
Yeah, that's it. It's a multi-layered problem. At the base layer, okay, what I consider the base layer is just your ability to prove your legal identity. And this is like oxygen for people, okay? They're not even aware that this problem exists because they've never had to deal with it, right? For the vast majority of people. You rely on your country of citizenship, okay, primarily. I would argue country of residency, secondarily, in order to be able to prove your own legal identity, okay? So with a photo, a government issued sovereign backed photo ID. Okay, huge attack vector and vulnerability for people who are stateless. Okay, they have a hard time getting IDs. The way IDs tend to work is you got to have ID to get ID. That's the catch 22. So if you're in that loop and you have IDs, right, then usually people don't have that much difficulty. They use the ID they have to renew that or to get other ID that's valid. And I include passports, by the way, in the category of legal ID. But if you're outside of that loop, if you're in the loop of having an ID to be able to get another ID, okay, then it's not that much of a problem for you. Okay, you're not really, these people are not that sensitive to, the centralization of their legal identity. But if you don't have that first government issued photo, government backed, sovereign backed, government issued photo ID, okay, in order to renew and to get other IDs, it's very difficult to live life modernly the way we know it. And what I was just saying was stateless people deal with that, and undocumented people deal with it to a lesser extent, but they also deal with it too. The reason they deal with it to a lesser extent is because very often stateless people can get a passport issued by their country of citizenship, even at the consulate in the country in which they're undocumented. So some people have an out, to be able to do that. But to John's point, yeah, I mean, I guess I see it both ways. Yes, it's difficult for people to be educated on this. It's very complex. It's difficult. However, on the other side, there is information out there. There are people that are writing about this, researching this. John is one of the premier ones, of course, and so there is info out there. But in order, I think the threshold question is how difficult is it to get information with sufficient detail and accuracy in order to make a well-informed decision, and I think that's difficult. I think it's quite difficult.
I think that's incredibly difficult because there's so much there's so much noise, right? Out there. There's so many people who they see this through the prism of whatever program they're trying to market, right? Only I think that the number of people out there who really understand this and are objective, I think, is really very, very few.
Absolutely agreed. Was it Grissa? Was it Arga or Grissa? Excuse me.
Yeah, no, it's you can call me Arga. I
Arga.
think it's easier.
Welcome. I think this is your first time here, and go ahead. Questions, comments,
Well,
stories.
I mean, you were saying about the question, you throw the question to the space about why and the reason and the factors, but I would say why not to have double citizenship? What I heard John saying that he doesn't understand why people do that, or it's in that, but what's the I would like to hear you elaborate what's the downside of having dual citizenship.
John,
Some people have even multi. It's not just dual. So
yeah, I'm not sure. I'll let John speak for himself, but I'm not sure that his position was that people shouldn't get dual citizenship. I think his comment was more about the difficulty for people in getting information to allow them to make informed decisions
Yeah.
about the topic. Um,
Yeah, I do not. Yeah, no. To be clear, I'm definitely not opposed to dual citizenship, and I think that to the extent that people can pick up one or more citizenships, as long as they understand if they come with any obligations, I think that's probably a very, very good idea, and I think it's a very good investment in their futures. And I'm very much listening to patients, for example, talking about, or whoever was talking about education, university education, for example, as a path to second citizenships. I mean, I think that these are all really, really good things. Where they become a problem, of course, is when the citizenship comes with some kind of an obligation that very, very clearly outweighs the benefit of that citizenship. And, there is one citizenship in the world that is extremely risky to have, and that's U.S. citizenship, unless you want to live in the United States. So, as long as one is well educated and as long as there isn't too much cost involved, I think it's probably a good idea.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just that some states, they don't, or government, they don't allow you to have two, or yeah, to have two. I think Venezuela is one. Um, but truly speaking, in the days that we live in, we see more people being mobile. And you stated the factors: economic, cultural, identity, citizenship. So, I mean, it really weighs in on what individual preferences and what that nation can offer you. If it's not something that it will affect you, I think that's why people, they tend to hold on to or more. But uh, I think that people like the idea to have a second choice if something happen, I guess. And that's that's nothing wrong. It's just, you know, I mean, I guess it's preferences at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, preference, circumstance, season of life, what part of your life you're in, right? As Patience talked about and talks about, really to distill, right? I mean, to put the decision making crudely, I think it's a cost benefit analysis, and
Absolutely.
specifically within cost. I believe, and this is no secret, I've said this probably on every space, and I've written, about this. I believe the most important costs to be weighed on that side is the imposition of extraterritorial obligations, obligations that follow you as a citizen of a country wherever you go on Earth. Those are ones you can't shake by just leaving, by just picking up, getting a flight, and going somewhere. So therefore, in my opinion, those costs have to be considered, with priority in considering picking up a second citizenship, right? And John obviously is referring to U.S. citizenship with reporting obligations and citizenship-based taxation and expatriation tax, right? These are things where you're not going to get out of them just by taking a flight to France or Mexico or wherever. So they have to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. But they do have a mechanism in which you can actually follow through. Some countries, of course. I think the key point here is to get informed, to educate yourself on the things that you need to do in order for you to move um, from location, right? Exactly what you're saying, the tax area, um, the benefits area, all these things that you need to take care of. I mean, property, whatever it is the case. But there is always mechanism to go through. I mean, if you're living that location, right? And I guess at the end of the day, the people will have to weigh in on um, on the things that, exactly what you're saying, cost benefit analysis, to say, okay, is it worth it for me to hold on these things? Am I going to be able to follow through, or is better just to surrender my citizenship, right? So 100%. Some countries they don't even know that they don't even have that report system. I heard you say in the United States, yes. So, but some other country they don't even have that report system of continuing reporting. But again, it really depends on the country that you have dual citizenship, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And go ahead, Patrick.
Oh, I was just going to jump in, and I think there's a framework to help it here because we do tend to have a lot of Americans on the on the line here, or as our friends abroad in Latin America say, los estadounidenses. Um, but I would say that uh, that paradigm for the United States is that the United States tolerates dual citizenship because it has that master citizenship rule. It is the global hegemon in terms of banking. And so, from a tax perspective, from a citizenship perspective, it it doesn't treat every other citizenship kind of like a second class citizenship, but it also kind of does. And that's why it's such a controversial citizenship, particularly if you've never lived here. It's Americans have American citizenship and say, I don't know if I need dual citizenship because they see it as the easiest place to get a job, the place where you can, earn the highest revenue. I think where you get into questions about trade-offs between citizenships, um, uh, and whether or not those are enforceable, tend to be, other countries. And I think, I know several countries that have rules against dual citizenship that absolutely do not enforce it. And they're examples in Latin America. I wouldn't necessarily recommend someone not follow the law, but if it's also unenforceable, are you leaving an opportunity on the table to pursue a citizenship? That's a gray area. Um, but again, that gray area tends to only come up if you are physically leaving the country and moving abroad. So I think from the perspective of an American, particularly who's pursuing dual citizenship and not moving, most of those tend to be citizenship by descent. Um, you brought up Venezuela. I've worked with a couple people from Venezuela who pursued Italian citizenship, and I am unsure of the laws between the EU and Venezuela, but I would imagine that they were in a situation where whether or not they had Venezuelan citizenship, they couldn't get a passport because passports were shut down for so long. And so they just used their Italian passport to travel and live abroad. So I think there's a big kind of fulcrum question between the trade-offs of dual citizenship, particularly if you're not moving.
Great,
Absolutely.
great points. Educating yourself, super important. John talked about it. We got Kadir here. Kadir, I'm adding you as a speaker. I'm just going to throw this question out to John, and then, of course, you and others are welcome to chime in. I want to ask John a question. Okay, John, you're deep in this world. You're an attorney, you're a counselor, and you're an advisor. You deal with and read and see marketers, practitioners, erudite academics. How do you tell whether somebody is giving sober analysis, real analysis versus marketing fluff? Okay, to try to sell, well, to try to hawk their wares. What heuristics do you rely on?
You mean in trying to decide whether somebody knows what they're doing?
Yes.
Well, I think that the first thing is that people don't reach out to me if they're feeling great about their lives. That's the first point. They're somewhere between the beginning of a crisis and trauma, all right? If they're Americans living outside the United States, they've got some problem with who knows what, tax or reporting, etc. So I think you can presume that people who come to you because they're wound up about something that has just happened are probably not in a good headspace to understand much of anything and make any decisions, because what they're really interested and this is understandable, right, is getting the immediate pain to go away or getting the crisis to go away. Okay. I think the second thing is, when you're looking at objective analysis, is that so much of the world, I mean, we talk about citizenship, but it's really finance and taxation that tend to drive a lot of these decisions. So second thing is this, you want to get rid of U.S. citizenship. Well, let's talk about what your assets are. because if you get rid of U.S. citizenship, you're changing your relationship to the United States from a tax residency perspective, which means all kinds of interesting things in terms of taxation. So the next question is, what kinds of assets do you have in the United States, and do you want to retain those assets? Have they even thought about that, right? A third question is, what kind of right of access do they feel they want to the United States? I think that there's not enough attention placed on this. A lot of people seem to, and I think this is generally true, but it's not so true that people should ignore it. They seem to think that if they renounce U.S. citizenship, that it hasn't really impaired their access, particularly to the United States, and I think that's a mistake. A fourth question is, the great trial lawyer Mo Levine, at the end of his personal injury cases, used to say, "It's not what they take from you; it's what they leave you with." Okay. So the question is, what are you left with in terms of citizenship? After you renounce. Now, that can be very significant because certain citizenships can give you rights under tax treaties, okay, and things like that. And again, depending on your overall sophistication, finance, and stuff, that can be a factor. I think for a certain caliber of person, and I don't mean that in a negative sense, although it will sound negative, I think that you might be it might be worth knowing, what kind of extradition treaties exist between the country where you plan to live in the United States or any other country. Uh, there are a number of civil law countries that won't extradite their nationals, for example. All right, or presumptively won't. Um, Estate tax treaties sometimes give benefits to citizens, okay, or not, depending. And and if you have a really sophisticated situation, the general tiebreaker rules in income tax treaties often default to citizenship and nationality to determine tax residence. And oddly enough, U.S. citizenship can be a huge advantage in a situation like that. If you specifically don't want to be a tax resident of a certain country, etc. So, that's probably a longer answer than you were expecting, but I mean, that's a range of issues that I think are important for people to understand, and particularly people who have money and assets.
Absolutely. John, if you see a post about citizenship on X, you have no idea who the account is. You see a video, you come across an article. My question to you is, how do you tell? What signals do you look for to see whether somebody, or to come to a conclusion about whether you think you're reading something from a high signal content creator, somebody who knows what they're talking about and is really analyzing it, or a salesperson for a citizenship, a residency, a tax package, etc.
You mean just based on the language and nothing more?
No, not just the language, based off of whatever clues you look for. What do you look at?
Um, well, I've seen so much of this that my general presumption is that they don't know what they're talking about. I think there's okay. So there's a difference between somebody who thinks about these concepts generally, starts from that, and then looks at somebody's individual circumstances, okay, and sort of works from that point. But I mean, if you're reading something that's, so incredibly specific, like, if you're an American, move to Mexico and don't pay taxes, that's sounds more like marketing, okay, even if it's true. Um, I mean, obviously you can see who the account is, and uh, you know, I mean, it's pretty easy to look at one of these accounts and know whether you're dealing with somebody who's a salesperson or somebody who, is a professional, with a fairly reasonable range of experience and knowledge. Um,
Might be easy for you. I'm not so sure how easy it is for people that are outside of our little bubble. You know.
well, I think it's very difficult, and I don't think that there's anything one can do about that. And it's because people look, people. believe what they want to believe, right? And everybody comes to this with a different sort of outlook on life. Remember that all these things we're talking about have varying application to different age groups, right? I mean, for example, a wealthy non-American, you know, would be crazy to get American citizenship, right? Or at least a wealthy non-American, with assets outside the United States. I mean, I can't think of a worse thing to happen to them. When there are so many ways to access the United States without citizenship, right? So, I think you should also look at the demographic to whom this stuff is actually aimed at. I mean, things that make sense to me, and like I cannot believe this. I think I've discussed this with patients who I've done at least one podcast with over the years. I think even more, but I can think of at least one. It's the situation in Canada. Okay, so Canada has a collection of sort of semi world class universities. Okay, I mean they wouldn't be in the top 10, but they're high middle tier or something, right? And Americans graduate from high school and they got to go to college or university somewhere, right? So why don't they go to Canada? Go to one of those schools. They've got to get an education anyway and plant the seeds, to get permanent residency and Canadian citizenship, right? Or to Australia or to the UK. I mean, why is this not something that they just think is a normal, intelligent thing to do, rather than some, rare exotic, why would you want to go, leave the United States sort of thing? I mean, can you help me with that?
Yeah.
Well, let me throw the question back at you. I mean, how can you tell? I mean, you're very deep in this and have been for a lot of years. I mean, I have the impression that this type of stuff it bothers you more on a personal level than it bothers me. Uh,
Yeah, that's fair to say. Um, yeah, it bothers me because people consume entertainment and they think they're consuming knowledge, and in my opinion, um, they're absorbing that and they're making decisions influenced by that fake info. Uh, Perhaps even more so than they might be aware of. Um, what do I look at? Well, basics. Okay, if somebody's a, presents themselves as a guru, or subject matter expert or a consultant, and if it's clear from their post that they actually don't understand the fundamentals or the basics, that's a red flag for me. Second red flag is if they're all enthusiasm and no balanced analysis, right? If it's all, if all the content in the posts are about how great X thing is, this citizenship, this residency, whatever, I don't consider that person to be an advisor or a consultant, because you have to obviously, to me, to be a true advisor or consultant, it means you're putting yourself in that person's shoes with that person's preferences, okay? And you're trying to evaluate everything, including the reasons why they would not or should not or should have paused before getting something. So if an account is just all enthusiastic encouragement, to pick up some citizenship or residency in particular, and there's no discussion of potential drawbacks, that's another red flag for me. So yeah, those are some of the red flags. I mean, another one I would say is, you know, does this person, do they ever read primary source materials?
well, now that I agree with you on totally, but you've got to understand, you just ruled out, I suspect, 95% of the people who talk about this. And I'm not kidding. Okay. I think it's probably you're ruling out 95%.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But I'll ask you, John. How could you be worth? I mean, how could you be, any type of real consultant or advisor, um, without having access. Now I get it. Some of this stuff is multi-jurisdictional. A lot of it is. Okay, so you might not be able to consume primary source in every single language that touches on the question. But how could you be any type of advisor or consultant without without referencing some, at least some primary source content? How is that possible?
Well, it's possible because, you go to government websites that provide summaries, but are not but don't state the law exactly, right?
Yeah, I think
Um,
that's great for basic summary, but when somebody's life or freedom or serious money is on the line, as you know, government websites can post wrong stuff, and they do post wrong stuff, right? So it's not, it doesn't have that same level of reliability. But yeah, I was just curious. So yeah, definitely, I would say it bothers me probably more than you. I'm just curious how other people that are on this call, what heuristics do people use? Let me throw it out to Patrick. Patrick, what do you look for in deciding whether you think an account is high signal or just a salesperson?
Yeah, I actually can speak to this personally, and that is that because I deal with a lot of multi-jurisdictional aspects when I'm doing research. If I'm pulling information from, the 1890s in, Belarus, which was at the time Poland, like there's a language hurdle for me to understand primary sources, right? There's a language hurdle just to interact with archivists and whatnot. So some things you can get around with translation, but by definition, something translated is not the original source. So um, I would argue that I'm going to use an example here with Italy, because we've been picking on Italy on this call, with all of the recent changes dated March 28th of this year. Um, the law was passed and the law was confusing. And so the Ministry of the Interior had to come up and issue, in Italian, a circolare, a circular, to put into practice what the law said into an administrative component. And that was inconsistent and confusing. And so all of the consulates that then had to enact what the Interior Minister did put out their own circulares. And so you had this confusing like primary source of law in Italian, Interior Ministry, the Interior Ministry, their circular was confusing, their primary source was confusing, and then all of the consulates, which by definition will all be different than the one another consulates. So that means the primary source in which you're basing an applicant's application off of is going to differ based on the consular jurisdiction. And so that is the example of primary source. But on the flip side, there is the knowledge of having done it before, and you know what happens in practice is not always the same as what happens based on a primary source, and that difference I think is probably what people want to have some comfort with. I think you know what has been successful in the past pending no legal changes is probably some component of expertise, and that is my very 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 long-winded way to say that when I hear someone talking about this, the two things I look for is A, have they done this before in practice and understand, you catch a consular office on a bad day and it can blow up your world? Or two, are very realistic about the timelines because everyone who's trying to sell something sells it like it's easy. A citizenship by descent case can take years. I know people who have taken over 7 years to get citizenship by descent. Pretty, weird circumstances. Usually involves a lawyer that I have to source in a foreign country. But anyone who's saying, "Oh yeah, your family's Italian, your family's Irish, go get Irish or Italian citizenship," and they speak nothing to the timeline. Ireland's probably the fastest, and that still takes more than a year. So, um, and that's if you have the right lineage, which is, again, another open question. So, uh, I I think my those are my two tells. Is some hint that they've done this before and are not just selling it, and two, that they're realistic with the timelines, which everyone is always under promising on the timelines.
Yeah, great point, Patrick. Have you done it before? The experience, right? Um, I've had people send me posts and clips and YouTube videos and podcasts, by uh, so-called, I call them glorified travel bloggers, but people that try to sell things in this space, talking about crazy plans of, they went and read a Wikipedia article or a few Wikipedia articles. They added up the timelines, and then, three citizenships. You can have these three citizenships in only 6 years. Stuff that can only be described as completely unmoored from reality. And yeah, John, maybe, I don't know if it's a personal thing, personality thing, or if it's just because I have people come to my consults and we have to unwind. I have to spend time unwinding this so much crap that a lot of them have consumed. Um, so yeah, people get thrown off. And but here's the thing. I will say this. I mean, Patrick, I'm glad you brought up the difference between what is written, what's the letter of the law versus what happens in practice. Super super important. And yeah, I do put emphasis on somebody who's been able to go through the process. If somebody's a consultant, even if they have, I'd go so far as to say this: if they're offering a service to get somebody or apply for a residency or citizenship for somebody, even if they really can't read, you know, or understand technically to a high level, but if they've done the thing before and brought a client through to the finish line, then on that point of actually getting the petition the mobility benefit, yeah, I would consider them, I consider them a practitioner. I consider them to be potentially high signal, right? So real world experience matters. And I mean, the example that I bring or that I think about is you're, I don't know, let's call it, you know 100 years ago, 200 years ago, you're at the edge of the Amazon forest. You got to cross over to the other side, right? um, you got a guide in front of you, maybe a tribesman, okay, illiterate, doesn't understand any of the science, but he's brought people across this 4 day or 5 day excursion 100 times before. He knows it inside out. He doesn't understand academically, technically, but he knows how to get the person to the other side. Versus a big brained academic who understands all the jungle and how it works and the fauna and all that type of stuff, but he's never actually brought somebody through. Who are you, now preferably you have both, right? Both in one person with the experience and the technical understanding. But if you have both of those, oh, definitely I would say the first person is as qualified, probably more qualified actually. So no, I don't think it's necessarily an emphasis on being technical. It's just I take it personal, John, when people are just making up nonsense. Content creators are making up nonsense, and sometimes I know it's nonsense because especially when they veer into kind of my areas that I'm really focused on. I know it's not just incorrect. Incorrect is forgivable. It's not just incorrect though. It's baseless or complete nonsense, and that's what I take offense to. We'll all be incorrect. I've been incorrect before. Everybody's incorrect at some point. That's forgivable, but totally baseless. That's to me that's not forgivable from a content creator. Okay, so it's 12:20 Pacific Standard Time where I'm here. We've been going for a good hour and 17 minutes, minus the 3 minutes that I guess I was on mute and talking to myself. Um, any last comments or questions or anything that somebody wants to bring up? We got Bad Boat here. I don't know if you, I think this might be your first time in one of our spaces. Welcome, Bad Boat. Feel free to speak up if you want to say something. Kadir, welcome. You are a speaker. Do you have any comments or questions? Anything you'd like to add?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, it's my first time in this space. That's a very interesting topic. I see we got a attorney, but I'm totally against to consultants. The first has a business owner, and second has an immigrant from El Salvador to United States, which is by consultants. They always drain you money, and they doesn't give a clear path through all the immigration processes. And also, is I don't want to offend the attorney here, but it's not my point. But some of these people is being they're being fraud by all these bad consultants, because of course I there's good consultants They know what they're doing. They know what they're talking about. They know how to research. But also here in the United States, we got a problem with the immigration attorneys because they don't have ethics, and that's a huge time, uh, uh, the big fraud against to the immigration community. In my case, most people doesn't know the United States allow you to have a second citizenship or dual citizenship. You don't have to resign no citizenship at all if you are do. But if you are third, you got to resign one, and most people doesn't know. And also, I heard you were coming about some kind of a propaganda, false propaganda outside, which is doesn't give you the whole panoramic view to see if you are allowed to move. And currently, here in the United States, you are not obligated to file taxes, but you have to pay taxes as any other citizenship that buys or and do commerce in the daily basis. The same thing when you move it abroad, you are not forced to file taxes, but you are forced to pay taxes because we all pay taxes in whatever we do. And I'm talking more in Central America. I haven't go to Europe yet, but I know a few countries. But I'm just been there for a couple of days. I cannot really talk about the whole tax experience. But in Central America and in South America, you are not obligated to pay or file taxes if you are a regular person or normal citizen. If you become a citizen, which is way less time than here to become a citizen, there's between 7 to 15 years because just the immigration process is about 7 to 10 years. Plus, you gotta be resident, legal residents, legal permanent resident for more than 5 years in order to apply for citizenship. So, in most countries, different than United States, you gotta wait period time between 1 to 3 years, which is very short time considering United States. And and those country you don't obligated to file taxes, but you have to pay taxes on a daily basis, how every other person does. Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Thanks for your comments, Kadir. The United States doesn't obligate people coming into U.S. citizenship with more than one citizenship to renounce or relinquish another one. I'm not sure if I heard if correctly what your statement was, but other countries can have restrictions on how many citizenships a person has. But from the U.S. side, a person naturalizing into U.S. citizenship is not obligated to relinquish or renounce the other citizenships. With regards to the fraud, yeah, you're right. I mean, there's bad actors. There's bad actors among attorneys, among consultants in the United States. We have a lot of, especially Spanish-speaking, consultants that they call themselves notarios, right? It's a play on words because we don't have the equivalent of a notario in the United States. A notary in the United States is just somebody who takes a 10-hour course that can attest that a person's signature is authentic. Whereas a notario, of course, in many Latin American countries is a legally trained individual, sometimes even at a level higher than a regular attorney. So yeah, we have that issue. Yeah, we have. There's no doubt we have bad actors. There's bad actors, among the bar, among people that are unlicensed, etc. So yeah, I no objection there to what you said. Um, I'm not sure exactly what you meant about the obligation to pay, or sorry, to pay but not file. I'm not exactly sure what you meant there. John, you have anything to say on that point?
Oh, nothing. I mean, these tax rules are so complicated that almost nobody actually. They become the way people behave is it's habitual behavior. It's not based on understanding. You know.
Absolutely. One point I wanted to bring up. I don't think we have time to really unpack it now. I might make it. It's kind of niche. I might make this a different space. But it's this meaning of the term expatriation that's used throughout statutes, case law, right? And I tend to think that part of the reason that a lot of Americans, especially older Americans, view residency and citizenship as being inextricably intertwined is because the word expatriation, the term, the concept, it's in a lot of primary source legal text in the United States, it sandwiches the concept of leaving the United States with the concept of relinquishing U.S. citizenship. It sandwiches them together, kind of. And sometimes expatriation is used to mean both. Sometimes it's used to mean one or the other. And I tend to think, and maybe I'll research this a little bit more before we have a whole space on it. But I tend to think that actually contributes to a lot of the confusion about these two concepts, combined with the fact that the old Bancroft Accords had a lot of rules that automatically strip somebody of citizenship based off of continuous absence from one country. That's kind of a tie, right, between residency and citizenship, that I think kind of forms the basis of this modern day conflation, even though the Bancroft Accords are not in effect anymore. John, dare I get an
Would
initial?
would would that apply for Nicaragua
Doesn't apply
when
at all
they
anymore. This is a vestige of American legal history. So no, that's not the case
oh
anymore. John, dare I ask you for
okay.
your preliminary impressions on what I just mentioned, and with the understanding
Yeah.
that maybe we unpack it later in a different discussion.
Yeah. Well, essentially, you're coming full circle, I think, because you began the discussion today with, I think you or somebody said, that people have trouble distinguishing residency from citizenship, right? And, you know, so, we're kind of back to that or close to that. And I think that's exactly right. And I think it's a particular problem in the United States because, it's such a big country and, so I would suspect that a much higher percentage of Americans, live their whole life in the United States, without really leaving, etc. And so there's no reason to think for them, the majority of them, they don't think about what citizenship means at all. And once you start seeing a correlation between residents and citizens, I think it becomes very easy for people to see them as one and the same, right? When, they're clearly not. And I strongly suspect that if people understood the extent of the difference between residency and citizenship, I think more Americans would want a second citizenship. That's my guess. Uh,
Absolutely,
you
absolutely.
know, I
That's
think
the
it's
case.
interesting, but let me ask you a question, and it's this: uh, I believe Russia has laws requiring the reporting of multiple citizenships. Do you think that the United States will get to the point where they require citizenship reporting?
Good question. My understanding is that Russia does require that. In fact, I remember posting about an article a couple of years ago of a dual Russian American citizen who's being held and jailed on a charge, or at least an allegation, that she had not done some sort of reporting related to the dual citizenship. So my rough understanding is that is the case for Russia. Um, I don't think so for the United States. I just United States is having difficulty even getting traction for U.S. congressional candidates, as you know, to report dual citizenship before they run for Congress, and that's not even something that's like passing with like a landslide. The other thing is because the United States history as a top tier destination for immigrants, we have so many dual citizens, including dual citizens who don't know that they're dual citizens. So I don't think we'll see that in my lifetime, but who knows? I don't have a crystal ball. What about you, John?
Um, well, what if I were to ask you a second question before answering that? And the question I would ask you is, you have been very open and honest posting from time to time about, the reality that American citizens don't have the right to leave the United States unless they have a U.S. passport, and the application can be denied, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you and I would agree, I think, that American citizens do not have a right to leave the United States as a starting point. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would.
Well, okay, so let me ask you the question again now. Okay, given that American citizens don't have the right to leave the United States, would that be a reason to require reporting of dual citizenship?
I'm not sure I follow your question because there's not an exemption to that. There's not an exception to that lack of right for American dual citizens. So I'm not sure I quite understand your
No,
question.
I know. Well, it's just that dual citizens have a way of have somewhere to go. They may not have a greater right to leave, but they do have somewhere to go, right?
Got it. Yes, yes. I don't see that much of a tie between those two things, to be honest, John, because as you know, 8 USC 1185 and the attendant regulations, it's all about exit from the United States bearing a valid U.S. passport or a substitute. There's not any reference, as far as I can tell, to where the person goes or what they travel on, what document they travel on outside of the United States. So I'm not sure I see. I think I know where you're going with this, which is, it might be a way, dual citizenship might be a way for Americans to kind of get out, to wiggle out of that piece of
Yeah, well,
control.
it definitely increases mobility, right? I mean, everybody who's in this space and in any future space would, I think, agree with that, right?
If
I just think that, I remember making this comment in another space, another one of your spaces, that this whole issue of dual citizenship it's gone from like zero to hero in the sense that, 8 years ago, if you ran a space like this, I doubt you get, 2, 3 people on it, right? But today, there's a lot of interest in it. And, as goes the interest, so goes, the possibility of regulation, right? And then we have people like, Senator Wyden, as on the Senate, who has been the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee when the Democrats were in power, making these pronouncements that dual citizenship provides opportunities for tax evasion and stuff, right? And then we have, the dual citizenship exemption from the exit tax, et cetera. I just think that this whole area is going to be getting an awful lot more attention, and that's not going to be good.
definitely agreed about where goes the interest, goes the regulation. Um, here's the thing. Here's the way I look at travel freedom based off of multiple passport. So American dual citizens, right? Let's split their travel limitations based off of travel documents into three categories. First category, travel outside of the United States. So destination that's outside the US to outside the US. Second category, travel from within the United States to outside the United States. And then category number three, travel domestically within the United States. For category 1 and 3, legally, having a second citizenship and another passport absolutely increases the person's mobility. Okay, so an American French citizen can leave the United States, use the French citizenship and passport to travel outside the United States freely. Similarly, that American French citizen can use their French passport within the United States to fly domestically past TSA. A valid foreign passport is a valid substitute for real ID. It's the middle ground that, at least legally, right, at least by language of the statute, is limited. Okay, the American French, the law says, United States law says, American French citizen has to, bear a valid U.S. passport or substitute in order to leave. Now, the statute's partially toothless, right? Because I haven't been able to find any statutory penalties or imprisonment for violating it. Um, but legally, that's what it says. Now, in practice, and here's where I think, John, we're getting to maybe the part that could be the vulnerable point, the point that's targeted by anti-dual citizenship elements or politicians. in practice, right, if somehow, some way, you're that American French citizen and you get out of the United States without bearing a valid U.S. passport, let's say you walk across the San Ysidro border, okay, during a period of time where they're not checking. Let's say you drive across the San Ysidro border, okay, no passport is checked, and you don't have your valid U.S. passport. Well, that person, that American dual citizen, has a freedom moving forward, okay, to travel within Mexico, leave Mexico, back to France, to Europe, that the American dual citizen does not. And obviously, with that freedom, I mean, freedom is double-sided, right? People can use the freedom for good purposes, and they can use it for tax evasion or other criminal purposes. So, on a practical level, like the actual practice of what can happen on the ground, yeah, I see where you're going, and I think I agree there. That could be targeted, right? By elements that want to take back some of that control by forcing dual citizens on a registry. It's possible. I still think it's less likely than likely, in my opinion. But yeah, that's what I would see as kind of you know maybe I shouldn't be saying this publicly, but if I'm in their shoes, that's probably the point that I'm going to try to target. I'm going to tackle and say, yeah, the law says they have to have the they have to bear the valid U.S. passport to exit. And yes, we can cancel their passport, but in practice, the dual citizen also has this other passport, and they can escape American control, escape the long arm of American justice by exiting with that other passport and gallivanting around the world on that second passport.
They become an escaped American. Imagine, escaped American.
John, your patented line's got to be up to like 80 or 90 at this. How many trademarked or should be trademark phrases are you up to now?
I don't have a clue. Probably ask Anthony. I think he keeps track of this stuff.
Escaped American, exactly.
Escaped American. We can add that one. Yeah.
There you go. A form is never just a form. A government form is never just a form. Okay, so
Oh, it's not.
No, it's not.
Actually, I have a new one.
Let's hear it.
That I came across in conversation with somebody yesterday. It just seems to me to be so obvious. Hang on, let me think of what it was. Oh yeah, we were talking. I was talking about trauma, and and for people on this call, American citizens outside the United States who try to file a U.S. tax return is basically a form. It's a form of trauma for them. Okay, it's so difficult. But okay, how about this? A form of terror. Okay, so so interacting with the U.S. it's a form of terror. Yes,
Form of terror. Okay, yeah,
a form of
that's a nice
terror.
wordplay. Entendre,
It's
right?
nice. Yeah, it's nice and short. A form of terror.
I like it. It is a form of terror.
It is a form of terror. There's no
More
question
ways than
about it.
one. Exactly. Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
T-shirts is the next step, John. I'm
You think?
absolutely. A form is never just a form. That's one that I have. I'm not kidding. I am going to actually print a T-shirt, at least for me. Maybe I'll make a 10 or 20 and gift them out. But I'm definitely
Make sure you should number them and number them as originals, okay? And make sure I get one of the first 20 because these are going to become collector's items.
You will definitely. That's a good idea. You will definitely get one. Top contributors to the space will be gifted a T-shirt that says "A form is never just a form." Okay, so we've been going for an hour and 40 right now. Good discussion. Thanks to everybody who joined. Anybody have a burning topic that they're interested in for space number 31? If so, come forth and speak. If not, I'm going to cook up 4 potential options today and put it to a poll that I will release on X. Anybody have a topic or topics that they suggest for the next space?
Why the immigration process is too long?
Why the immigration process? Are we talking about U.S. or you mean just in general?
U.S. immigration processes are too long.
I think we'd have to have a marathon all-day space to address that. But okay, that is an interesting topic, and it affects a lot of people. Okay, thank you for the suggestion. I'll consider that one. Anybody else?
Yeah, I still like passport validity period. And I also will add that if we're feeling spicy, like there's some potential for some solid disagreement, I saw that you had possibly suggested like content or influencers who people might like. I think that's a very imperfect but potentially interesting spaces topic.
We can do spicy. We have all the room for disagreement here. In fact, I was hoping Anthony Parent would come in on our space before talking about dual citizens in Congress because he's adamant against it. But he's a busy man. But yeah, we like opposing views here. We like discussion. It's fun. So yeah, that's a potential topic. John, any topic that's near and dear to your heart that you'd like to suggest?
I think citizenship reporting would be interesting. I think countries that do not allow dual citizenship, period. I think that would, there's not tons of them, but I think that might be interesting. I don't know. I mean, you seem to be, I admire your ability to sort of slice and dice these things. I think you're going to get to all of them anyway, one way or the other.
I appreciate it. For the record, this Spaces was inspired by your space back in January when you really started in earnest. So appreciate that. Appreciate the support. Okay, that's which countries have dual citizen or allow dual citizenship and which ones don't. I think we're probably never going to get to that. That's been discussed. It's discussed a lot. I am getting more interested in this question that you posed. Of the possibility of citizenship reporting in the U.S. I'm going to think about that one and see if I could add it to some related topics. If that would be interesting enough for a whole
Well, of
space.
course, if you run the space, it'll make it more likely they'll think it's a good idea. You don't want to.
Yeah, you're right. We don't want to give it too
I mean,
much
you don't want to
oxygen.
offer these things up as good ideas.
It's true.
But I do fear that. I mean, as I say, the way I look at it is as things get interesting, the interest in regulation begins.
Absolutely. Okay, I will take that under advisement. Good point. We don't want to give bad ideas too much oxygen. So I'll consider that. Okay. Stay tuned, everybody. I'm still going to put up a poll with the options. I will give extra weight to the topics that were suggested by participants today. I want to thank John Richardson of Citizenship Solutions, Patrick McFawn of XLM Consulting, Kadir Arastigui, excuse me for the pronunciation, Patience is Alpha, and everybody else who tuned in, including our anonymous listeners. We have a lot of anonymous listeners, I can tell when I look at the stats after the fact. So thank you. And we will be doing our next space, as always, on Monday, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, space number 31. Have a great one, guys.